As the clouds rolled in, abruptly cutting short my recording session, I was reminded of the significance of the ever-changing weather along the southeast coastline. The dangerous journey faced by increasingly disenfranchised asylum seekers in small boats was brought into sharp focus as the waves below the cliffs grew larger and more menacing. As I left the site, reflecting on the quaintly British scenes I had witnessed, I was struck by how invisible the Silicon Valley military surveillance technology is to the average person. It was only when I aimed my camera's lens at the tower's array of sensors that a pair of middle-aged joggers paused to ask about what it was I was filming, their curiosity piqued by what had otherwise become taken for granted within the coastal landscape surrounding Fairlight Coast Guard Station. For those who understand its significance, its presence is both subtle and unnerving. The Home Office's deployment of Anduril Maritime Sentry Towers to detect and monitor asylum seekers crossing the English Channel in small boats, both literally and metaphorically, embodies the exclusionary policies of the British hostile environment. This convergence of policy and technology highlights how developments in AI-driven border surveillance are in fact deeply embedded in asymmetric power relations that are built on the basis of enforcing border apartheid. Such asymmetric relations are designed to classify and identify people who are deemed imperfect or illegitimate as asylum-seeking subjects, despite the knowledge that displaced people seek refuge in the UK due to conflict, poverty, and climate change. Despite this, Anduril Maritime Sentry Towers are primarily employed for their ability to algorithmically detect small boats within an approximate 9-mile radius. They achieve this by using an array of third-party sensors, scanning the environment with radar to detect movement, orienting a camera towards the detected motion, and analyzing the resulting imagery using artificial intelligence and deep learning algorithms. These towers are primarily equipped with a Furuno solid-state Doppler radar, a marine radar technology traditionally used by recreational boats, and an Echodyne EchoGuard, an electronically scanned array radar capable of detecting, tracking, and classifying surveillance subjects, regardless of weather or lighting conditions. In addition to these target discrimination systems, these towers are often fitted with Maximet sensors, designed by Gill Instruments, which measure a range of environmental parameters, including wind speed and direction, temperature, pressure, humidity, and precipitation, through ultrasonic and optical technologies. While the exact manner in which this meteorological data is integrated with Anduril's surveillance assemblage remains unclear, the inclusion of these sensors in harsh weather environments likely facilitates the original surveillance functions of these towers. Alongside these sensors, Anduril employs a long-range electro-optical CMOS camera paired with a medium-wavelength infrared imaging system. According to relayed information gleaned from security trade shows, Fujifilm's SX1600 is currently Anduril's preferred electro-optical camera. This visible spectrum camera features a powerful optical zoom lens ranging from wide-angle to extreme close-ups, with digital magnification extending up to a 3200mm focal length, equivalent to a 1/1.8-inch effective sensor size. Functionally, it allows the towers to capture high-definition images of distant objects, which are further enhanced with features such as image stabilization, high ISO performance for low-light conditions, autofocus, and fog reduction. Considering the SX1600 was released in April 2023, it is likely that earlier Sentry Tower configurations may have used other surveillance CMOS cameras, such as Fujifilm's SX800, released in July 2019. Whilst the exact model of the mid-wave infrared camera is not definitively known, Anduril marketing videos provide a clear view of the MWIR sensor during assembly. Although not officially confirmed, the design strongly resembles SCD USA's Panthera 15F900, which likely integrates their Blackbird SXGA detector. This sensor captures high-definition infrared images using a 1280 by 1024 array of 10-micron pixels, Operating in the mid-wave infrared 3.6 to 4.9 microns range, it offers an optical zoom from 90mm to 900, with an additional 4 times digital zoom in specific configurations. SCD USA's parent company, Semiconductor Devices, is jointly owned by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, an Israeli government entity, and Elbit Systems, a major Israeli defense contractor. SCD USA's brochure explicitly states that the company reserves the right to make product designs or specification changes without notice, which could account for the minor differences between the sensors seen in the Anduril footage and publicly available images of the Panthera 15F900. SCD USA was contacted for confirmation, but given the nature of this industry, a response was never received. If accurate, this would indicate the integration of an advanced Israeli-designed MWIR sensor into Anduril's autonomous surveillance towers. The zoom capabilities of these camera sensors are so extreme that when simulated in 3D software, it becomes evident that the tower's cameras can capture high-definition imagery of subjects at distances of up to several kilometers. This not only underscores the imaging power of the tower's camera sensors, but also highlights the stark imbalance in power asymmetries, where states capable of enforcing border apartheid deploy such optical surveillance technology to observe individuals from extreme distances with high precision. This dynamic reinforces harmful narratives, framing displaced people through a militarized lens while normalizing the use of advanced surveillance in border enforcement. The modular surveillance assemblage of the Anduril Sentry Tower is operated via an artificial intelligence detection system known as Lattice OS. Described as an operating system for war, Lattice OS is presented as a sleek, cloud-based command and control interface. Accessible via standard internet browser, each detection is logged with details such as date, time, location, and the velocity of the monitored objects and individuals. Ostensibly deemed an unfair advantage for unrivaled deterrence, Lattice OS is also claimed to be a force multiplier, reducing the need for border force operatives on patrol and minimizing active human involvement in surveillance monitoring. While initial Freedom of Information requests made in early 2024 were unsuccessful, the Home Office later disclosed information regarding their contract with Anduril Industries in response to a request made by Anna Christoforou in September 2024. The contract, titled CCTC Common Operating Picture and Command Interface, valued at £16,087,370, began on the 22nd of June 2022 and is set to run until the 22nd of June 2025. The locations of autonomous surveillance towers were identified and geolocated using satellite imagery, user-submitted videos and photos, and Google Street View, supplemented by first-hand accounts. Each piece of explicit evidence, from remote sensing maps to user-submitted footage, has been meticulously logged and verified. Although Google Earth and Bing Aerial View often failed to reveal the towers due to outdated satellite imagery, Apple Maps ultimately enabled the identification of additional Sentry Towers, providing visual signatures for every known tower, past and present. Each tower has also been visited in person to confirm its presence on the ground. As of the time of recording, there are 8 known towers in operation between Hastings and Margate. One at Fairlight Coast Guard Station, Dungeness New Lighthouse, Hythe Ranges, Shorncliffe Army Camp, Capel Fern Cliffs, Dover Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre, Walmer and Kingsdown Golf Club, and Ramsgate Port, with a 9th just outside Hythe Ranges, near Jury's Gap, that has either been dismantled or relocated. The Maritime Sentry Tower at Dungeness Lighthouse, the latter of which is owned and operated by Trinity House, is situated on land subject to regulatory conditions. Due to the private nature of the Dungeness estate and its stringent restrictions, on-the-ground footage cannot be taken or published without authorization. However, it is well documented through user-submitted photos and videos on Google Maps and YouTube. Whilst towers have not been found outside of the stretch of coast between Hastings and Margate, That is not to say that they do not exist. Although significant time and effort has been invested in identifying many of them, additional towers may still remain to be discovered and verified. Since 2018, autonomous surveillance towers have become the algorithmic techno-political backbone of what is known as the Smart Wall along the US-Mexico border, which was marketed as a cheaper and more effective alternative to the physical border wall initially championed by Donald Trump. According to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, there are approximately 159 documented Anduril Sentry Towers as of March 3rd deployed along the US-Mexico border. The genealogy of the autonomous surveillance tower explicitly begins with projects like Boeing's SBI-Net, a supposed cornerstone of the US Department of Homeland Security's Secure Border Initiative in the mid-2000s. SBI-Net sought to create a virtual fence using a network of sensors, radars, and cameras designed to monitor, predict, identify, and classify border crossings, with the stated goal of deterring and apprehending migrants. Instead, SBI-Net was plagued with technical failures, budget overruns, and delays, leading to its eventual cancellation in 2011.
In the process of delivering it, and I can't explain how we got here.
Yeah, and I just don't understand, just from a technical standpoint, why it's so difficult. I mean, they're basically cameras on a pole, and we've got folks monitoring on multiple cameras on,
right,
in a dispatcher format. Now, I've been out there and I've seen them, and I just don't understand why we're having problems.
Following SBI-Net's demise, Elbit Systems and General Dynamics took up the mantle of facilitating US border apartheid in 2015. Their respective solutions, integrated fixed towers and remote video surveillance systems, represented a significant shift towards advanced networked surveillance technologies along the border. Elbit's involvement in Israel-Palestine has long been tied to its role in maintaining the architecture of apartheid and settler colonialism. The company's surveillance technology in Palestine served as the blueprint for its export to other geopolitical borders, where surveillance is increasingly coupled with militarization to control migration. The Anduril Sentry Tower was directly built on the technological and operational foundations laid by Boeing, Elbit Systems, and General Dynamics. Their grim novelty lies in their infrastructural independence, powered simply by solar energy and external batteries, deployable and relocatable within mere hours. However, Anduril's Lattice OS ultimately represents this genealogical shift from its predecessors, employing AI algorithms to autonomously detect, track, and classify deemed objects of enmity along the border. Such algorithms are rooted in broader AI initiatives like Project Maven, a US Department of Defense program that used machine learning to analyze vast amounts of surveillance data from military drones, automating the identification and categorization of deemed potential targets. The project attracted significant attention and controversy in 2018 when it was revealed that Google was a key contractor. Following internal and external pressure, Google withdrew, and Palantir and Anduril, both funded by Peter Thiel, took over the contract, highlighting the Pentagon's pivot towards partnering with artificial intelligence companies more closely aligned with the militarized technopolitics. As such, the genealogy of the autonomous surveillance tower represents a significant shift in the increasing militarization and automation of borders. The tower's capabilities and the deployment of AI-driven decision-making systems point to a future where borders are managed not by human decision-makers, but by algorithms. In this model of surveillance, refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants are abstracted as mere data points in a larger algorithmic process, subsuming their humanity to prejudicial categories like threat, risk, or illegal. They instead become increasingly portrayed through a reductive lens of criminality associated with drugs, terrorism, or security threats, alienating them from discussions around democracy, human security, and human rights. As Louise Amour might argue, their very existence is redefined as they become spatially reassembled and reconfigured through the alteration and militarization of data and images. By treating individuals as mere objects for algorithmic classification, these systems fail to address the deep causes of migration. Instead, they focus solely on the enforcement of a state's borders, making vulnerable those seeking asylum, leading to a world where technological systems are deployed not to protect the humanity and rights of people, but to enforce an increasingly militarized global apartheid. If we transition from the tower to the boat, our understanding shifts. Instead of merely simulating the discriminatory and prejudiced gaze of surveillance, when we turn our attention to the image, or more accurately, the experience of those in the small boat, we encounter a reality marked by precarity, courage, and desperation. For what else could compel someone to take such a risk, crossing a perilous sea in a crowded boat between 21 to 40 miles in the dark of night? Such algorithmic reconfigurations of data and imagery of the small boat asylum seeker potentially has a wide web of public and private complicities. Since 2013, the British government has enforced a cloud-first policy for all technological decisions, dictating that, quote, public sector organizations should default to public cloud first, using other solutions only where this is not possible. In November 2023, the Home Office awarded a successive cloud computing contract to Amazon Web Services to the tune of £450 million. It is plausible that AWS is hosting data collected and processed by Anduril Sentry Towers. Such speculation is not without merit, given Amazon's existing cloud computing contracts with various Western defense departments, most notably the US Department of Defense. Amazon does not publicly disclose the exact locations of its data centers, providing only general information about its infrastructure through the announcement of regions and availability zones. AWS data centers instead operate under holding companies, creating inconspicuous footprints at their respective locations. According to the data center map, Amazon has 3 estimated data centers in their London region. Home Office data collected by Anduril Sentry Towers could be hosted and operated from these very locations. Like Palantir, Anduril takes its name from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, co-opting the symbolism of the reforged sword that represents the emancipation of Middle-earth from the all-consuming power of the One Ring. This Flame of the West reinforces an ideological framework rooted in enmity and exclusion, as Anduril Sentry Towers become coded in a language of exclusion, framed as protective bastions and sentinels of the world of men, against perceived threats from a racialized global south. The choice of this name and symbology is not incidental. It reflects a deeper mythologization of border security and defense, where technology is cast as a righteous weapon wielded in the protection of civilization. The implicit logic at play positions the global south as a chaotic and encroaching force, one that must be monitored, contained, and ultimately repelled. Although Anduril's founder, Palmer Luckey, has claimed that the company aims to embody not only the best technology, but also the highest ethics and democratic values, its technological architecture reveals a different reality, one in which the enmity-driven logic behind the Anduril Sentry Tower frames migrants as an undifferentiated horde whose movement threatens the purity and sovereignty of the West, ultimately supporting a broader societal desire for border apartheid, despite professed commitments to Western humanitarian and democratic virtue. This form of hostility has directly contributed to rising deaths along the US-Mexico border by forcing migrant routes into increasingly remote and inhospitable terrain. As Samuel Chambers, Jeffrey Boyce, and others detail in Mortality, Surveillance, and the Tertiary Funnel Effect on the US-Mexico border, heightened surveillance does not prevent migration, but instead displaces it, driving people seeking asylum away from urban crossings and into the unforgiving expanse of the desert. Here, the physical toll of the journey escalates as the energy cost of traversal rises in tandem with the risks of dehydration, hypothermia, and exhaustion. This funnel effect transforms the landscape itself into a weapon, where border enforcement operates not through direct confrontation, but through the slow attrition of human life. As autonomous surveillance towers become increasingly embedded along the English coastline, so too, perhaps, the desert of the sea, in the form of the English Channel, may increasingly emerge as its own lethal frontier. In some ways, it already has. In 2024, a record number of people lost their lives attempting to cross the Channel, as reported by the UN's Missing Migrants Project, a statistic echoed by the Refugee Council's January 2025 report, which highlights a dramatic rise in fatalities. In contrast, in early 2024, the Home Office argued these towers are in fact a technology of humanitarian intervention and preservation. Despite open source information in the public domain, the disclosing of their locations and respective contracts was portrayed such that, quote, migrants may be placed in even greater jeopardy by making them less easy to detect by UK and French patrols engaged in safety of life at sea operations. They also contended that such a disclosure of the requested information could aid the criminal seeking to facilitate these dangerous small boat crossings by informing organized criminal gangs about the technology being deployed against them, enabling them to develop countervailing activity to increase their likelihood of success, to support their planning and inform new tactics and routings. However, given the implicit and stated aims of the Maritime Sentry Tower alone, it is not difficult to realize that the UK government has utilized these towers as part of a border apartheid strategy, employing this AI surveillance assemblage to further militarize the southern maritime border. Whilst the complex interplay between border surveillance and search and rescue operations often form a broader justification and narrative that recenters border enforcement as a necessary form of care, reframing the state's role in protecting lives as it enforces exclusionary policies, a lack of transparency raises questions about the true intentions behind these autonomous surveillance towers, as well as the extent to which they function as instruments in Britain's hostile environment, funneling irregularized migrants into an ever-tightening web of state control and hostility. In practice, the algorithmic tools presented as safeguards against supposed criminal networks instead push people seeking asylum into greater precarity, reinforcing a compliance-driven, rules-based approach under Labour. In this regard, despite shifting rhetoric from stop the boats to smash the gangs, Keir Starmer's approach has not fundamentally broken from the previous Tory government's illegalising approach to cross-channel migration. Instead of dismantling the architecture of border apartheid and creating safe routes into the British asylum system, Labour has prioritised setting up a new border security command to to expand the UK's intelligence and enforcement capabilities. With the looming introduction of the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill, which aims to reshape immigration enforcement, Labour seeks to grant new counter-terrorism-style powers to tackle so-called smuggling gangs, despite evidence that increased securitisation only drives people seeking asylum into the hands of third-party intermediaries. As Professor Catherine Costello argues, the criminalisation of these services is, quote, antithetical to refugee protection and fundamentally ignores the conditions that force people to seek unauthorised routes. While Labour has removed provisions in the Illegal Migration Act that outright blocked asylum applications from cross-channel migrants, allowing their cases to be properly processed, its broader commitment to enforcing the border remains unchanged. The incoming Border Security Bill intensifies legal controls by criminalising not only perceived acts of refusal of rescue, but also imposing endangerment charges and targeting those deemed to be piloting vessels during perilous crossings, regardless of whether by choice or coercion. Moreover, data gathered by Anduril Maritime Sentry Towers and Lattice OS could be repurposed within this criminalisation framework, with such evidence potentially being used in asylum claim determinations or criminal prosecutions, which would effectively link surveillance intelligence to the enforcement of a punitive regime that blurs the lines between security imperatives and humanitarianism. A Freedom of Information request has been submitted to the Home Office to ascertain whether such data has been, is, or will be used to influence or determine cases. A formal response is expected on the 4th of April. The Home Office has previously claimed that, quote, those looking to exploit our borders are also increasingly better equipped to do so as technology advances, and law enforcement must be able to stay ahead of the threat by developing its own capabilities. The continued operation of Anduril Sentry Towers under Labour's governance suggests that the Home Office sees these autonomous surveillance technologies not as a temporary measure, but as a permanent fixture of Britain's border regime, an embodiment of a reheated neoliberal vision of national security, all while in a state of managed socio-economic decline. While no doubt some will continue to advocate for the perceived benefits of these AI technologies, we must not forget that the companies behind them are the very same that produce and enable this. As displaced people have continued to arrive in the UK via small boats, and in increasing numbers, it remains unclear whether these autonomous surveillance towers have had any meaningful impact beyond reinforcing the political spectacle of border apartheid. Despite the previous Conservative government Stop the Boats campaign and the enduring systemic barriers of the hostile environment, channel crossings have not waned. In 2024 alone, 36,816 people risked the dangerous journey to reach British soil. Moreover, the Home Office has consistently refused to publicly disclose granular and expanded details regarding its contracts with Anduril, deliberately obscuring the true scale of its surveillance operations, leaving many questions unanswered. With the current contract set to expire in June 2025, the possibility of its renewal looms, making the need for transparency and public scrutiny all the more vital. What is certain, however, is that the surreptitious militarization and increased securitization of Britain's borders, as exemplified by Anduril and its technopolitical relationship with the Home Office, increasingly undermines the needs and rights of the people who seek asylum, creating and inflicting unnecessary harm. These towers are far from neutral sentinels. They are active agents in an increasingly automated system of border apartheid designed to filter, categorize, and repel those deemed undesirable. They do not render asylum safer, nor do artificial intelligence algorithms make migration fairer. Instead, they entrench the logic of exclusion, serving as one of many first ports of entry into state-sanctioned systems of hostility through legal and bureaucratic exhaustion, enforced economic and social precarity, ultimately acting as methods of slow violence and deterrence. For those who seek asylum via small boats, the Anduril Maritime Sentry Tower is a stark reminder of where the British hostile environment itself begins.